So as a reminder, the motto or slogan of this channel is pondering politics and pop culture, because those are my two major interests, right? So in terms of generic culture or culture war issues, I tend not to say much on these topics because they just don't interest me all that much. So you take somebody like Elon Musk, who is a dominant cultural figure. He's the world's second richest man at the time of this video. And, ever since he acquired Twitter, he has taken a more active presence in the lives of everyday Americans, because now he's a major player in social media, not just as a user, but as the CEO of a major social media company. And even then, I haven't said much about Musk, just because, number one, I don't, really follow him. I actually literally don't follow him on Twitter, because I don't want to be one of the 112 million people actively contributing attention to him, because I think he's a narcissistic troll. But that said, we will talk about him today because he is, whether I like it or not, a major political force in American politics, and arguably through American politics and through his wealth, international politics writ large. So as everybody knows, Elon Musk has gone through a trial by fire since he acquired Twitter. I think the prevailing theory is he basically trolled himself into buying Twitter. Like he, petitioned to do it or campaigned on doing it publicly, I think as a troll, as a gotcha, to kind of like rustle some people's jimmies and some feathers and stuff like that. And then put himself in a position where he essentially had to follow through, and Twitter called his bluff, and he had to purchase Twitter. As a result, one thing led to another. Tesla stock is doing incredibly poorly at the moment. I don't think Twitter's is doing that well either. We've seen a mass exodus of major Twitter advertisers, and the general consensus seems to be that Musk is not handling his stewardship of the social media company very well. The press is overwhelmingly negative, and understandably so. And I'm really not interested in that so much, but again, about Musk's politics. But I do want to say, apparently, he will step down as Twitter CEO. He did a poll recently on Twitter. He does a lot of things via poll. I think some sort of Latin phrase, vox populi, vox dei, the voice of the people is the voice of God. And he just pretentiously adds that to every poll he does. And he tweeted on Tuesday evening that he would resign as Twitter CEO as soon as I find someone foolish enough to take the job, which is interesting because I guess he was foolish enough to pay $40 or $50 billion to be CEO in the first place. So I guess he's kind of tacitly admitting that he's an idiot, but that's beside the point. Musk's day-to-day involvement with Twitter has so far been chaotic and unpredictable, but it's unclear if a new leader will be able to address the company's business and morale problems under Musk's ownership. So Musk polled his followers whether he should stay or go, and 57% urged him to quit, which again, for somebody who's clearly a narcissist and perhaps even a malignant narcissist, this was probably devastating. We saw that he was pulled on stage by Dave Chappelle during one of Dave Chappelle's shows, and the crowd booed him overwhelmingly, even though Musk said that actually no, they were actually overwhelmingly cheering for him, and there were just a couple of really loud booers. But the video footage suggests otherwise. But anyway, his rampant evidence of thin skin aside, the reason this is interesting to me is because, again, whether I like it or not, Musk is a major political force in this country, not just in terms of his cultural takes, but his political advice. And I want to talk about a couple of these things. So a couple of particular issues I have with Musk, one of the big ones is that he has pitched himself, he's directly called himself a free speech absolutist, and he's hinted that he is a free speech absolutist in his behavior time and again. He's constantly appealed to the notion of free speech absolutism. And it's stupid because we know that's not true. Number one, he's never been a free speech absolutist. We have reports where, he's fired employees for being critical of him, which he is entitled to do as the CEO of a company. But you're not a free speech absolutist if you essentially punish somebody for speaking freely. You may have the legal right to do so. You may even have the fiduciary responsibility to do so, but by definition, you are not a free speech absolutist because there is a limit to the free speech that you will tolerate. Since he has taken over Twitter, we've seen it again and again and again. He'll ban certain parody accounts. He'll delete accounts with footage of that he doesn't like the Dave Chappelle thing. He notoriously deleted or banned an account that was tracking his jet publicly, even though he publicly committed that he would not do it. He went ahead and did it anyway. Again, he's perfectly entitled to do so under law, but he's a hypocrite because that's a clear indication that he is not a free speech absolutist. So he's a liar, or just very lazy in his thought by pitching himself this way. Another issue that I have with Musk, the second and probably bigger one, is that he constantly pitches himself in 2022 as a centrist, as an enlightened centrist. And that's so frustrating because enlightened centrism is cringe and it's stupid, okay? For Twitter to deserve public trust, it must be politically neutral, which effectively means upsetting the far right and far left equally. I don't even know what that means, right? It's like saying, in order to be, politically neutral, we really need to piss off Nazis and the people they oppress at the same time. Like, can you imagine somebody saying that and being taken seriously in the 30s and 40s? The people who did say stuff like that in the 30s and 40s are historically reviled, and with good reason. Treating two sides of a conflict as though they are equally bad, which is what he's tacitly doing here, is ridiculous. The far left is, I'm sure, far from perfect in terms of policy, in terms of rhetoric, in terms of morals. I'm sure that you can cherry pick examples of where a far leftist has said or done something bad, but to suggest that they are remotely comparable in terms of the threat they pose or the bad takes they have to the far right is ridiculous. The far right is objectively far worse than the far left in terms of the their political prominence, the hold they have on major political institutions, and really in terms of their propensity towards actual violence. We know that political attacks from the far right, physical attacks, terroristic threats from the far right represent a considerably greater challenge than the far left. So that's really stupid. And then, of course, was his advice during the midterms and in the election cycle leading up to the midterms. Excuse me, I'm still recovering from that cough from Georgia when we were out canvassing with Destiny to win the runoffs for Senator Raphael Warnock, which we did, help save democracy. I still have a cough from that. But Musk really leaned into the centrism during the election cycle, and it was so stupid because, like right here, it says, to independent-minded voters, shared power curbs the worst excesses of both parties. Therefore, I recommend voting for a Republican Congress given that the presidency is Democratic. And the problem is this. There are a few problems with this. I mean, we've already addressed just the premise that centrism means they're both equally bad or they're both equally good and you gotta have equal parts both. That's really stupid. It's really dumb. But even if you accept the premise, well, there are three branches of government, not two, three, right? You have the executive branch, the presidency, which is Democrat. You have the legislature, which is bicameral, so there are two chambers. And until the midterms, they were both technically controlled by Democrats. And then you have the judicial branch in the form of the Supreme Court, which currently has a 6-3 regressively conservative supermajority. So if he had it his way, if Musk had it his way, and the midterms were that red wave and both chambers flipped for the Republicans, that would give control of two branches to the Republicans to one branch controlled by the Democrats. So he's full of shit, number one. Number two, he doesn't apply this logic to down ballot races, right? So you look at it, we have 50 states, and it's like, I'm pretty sure it's 30 or 38 state legislatures are controlled by Republicans, right? The majority of states are red, right, and controlled by Republican leaders. Now, the majority, like the most populous states, tend to be blue, and the major population clusters, like cities, tend to be blue. So more people are Democrats and governed by Democrats in this country, but in terms of state legislatures, they're Republican. Right? And so it's like, if you're really concerned with this arbitrary balance of power thing, why weren't you encouraging your followers, your 112 million followers, however many of them are, eligible voters in the United States, why wouldn't you follow that up then if you're being consistent and honest and say, okay, I want you to vote for Republicans in federal elections, but I also want you to vote such that Democrats are able to close the gap with Republicans for state governor races, state secretaries of state races, and statewide election officials in general. But he didn't say that because he's full of shit. He's just dishonest. He is like most centrists, he is a conservative, a reactionary conservative, masquerading as an enlightened moderate. It's just not true. Some more bad advice. Like most people in America, I agree with some of the Democrat and some of the Republican policies, but not all. However, if executive and legislative branches are dominated by one party, we lose balance of power. So again, here's the problem with that. The premise is just horseshit. Even before Democrats lost the midterm, in terms of the House, their majorities in the Senate and in the House of Representatives were so thin that it was like pulling teeth enacting legislation, right? Think of how difficult. President Biden has enjoyed tremendous legislative success, which is testament to his bipartisanship. He has actually secured, through great pains, through torturous pains, through pains that frustrate me, where I've wanted him to just throw his hands up and try to bully his way into a partisan outcome. Most of the victories he owes to the fact that he was able to secure, in many instances, Republican support. So it's not like it's just been the Senate and the House have been just a rubber stamp for Biden's legislative agenda. Major aspects of his policy agenda were not passed during the past 2 years. And some of that is attributable to renegade Democrats, people like Kyrsten Sinema, people like Joe Manchin, right? So this idea that without a Republican Congress, Biden will just ram through his far-left agenda, it's just not true. So Musk has not been paying attention to the past 2 years, or if he has, he's lying about it. But the other thing that I want to address here is the idea that, like most people in America, I agree with some Democrat and some Republican policies. When the fact of the matter is that according to most polling out there, and this is nothing new, the majority of people in this country, more often than not, 9 times out of 10, back Democratic policies over Republican policies. Republican policies are so unpopular that the GOP doesn't campaign on Republican policies anymore. They campaign on culture war stuff. What policy proposals have they suggested for curbing inflation, for securing the border, for all these things? They just don't have a policy-based argument because the stuff that they back is unpopular. So Musk is misdiagnosing again the situation where he's like, oh, America wants a little bit of Republican, a little bit of Democrat. It's just not true. They may want some Republican. I'm not going to pretend that they want literally that every single person in the United States wants literally every single Democratic policy position passed. But if you take it in aggregate, the overwhelming, the statistically significant majority of Americans, not just 51%, but in the 60s, in the 70s, 60 to 70% of Americans want predominantly a Democratic agenda passed, want the Build Back Better Act passed, no matter how you break it down. It's just not true. Yes, Democrats don't enjoy 99% support or anything like that. Yes, there seems to be a popular sentiment that they want, I don't want to say formidable, but a meaningful Republican counterweight to Democrats, but this isn't 50-50, and it hasn't been 50-50 since God knows how long. As a matter of fact, in every election, every presidential election, for the highest office in the land, the one that tends to generate the most turnout, presidential elections, Republicans haven't won a majority in the past 35 years, except for George W. Bush in 2004. Every presidential election afterwards and before, Democrats have won. Since Reagan until now, Democrats have won the popular vote every single time except for Bush in 2004. This is not a 50-50 country, so he's full of shit. And to pretend that it's just, well, we want a little bit of this and a little bit of that. No, most people want most Democratic policies. They want, if you're looking at a plate, they want most of the plate to be scooped on with Democratic policies. And then maybe a few people, they want some a side here and there of some Republican policies or whatever. But the clear and overwhelming consensus favors Democrats and has for some time. So it's just not true. And then Same sentiment. While it's true that I've been under unfair and misleading attack for some time by leading Democrats, my motivation here is for centrist governance, which matches the interests of most Americans. And again, it's just not true. Now, this is why I kind of wanted to rail on Elon Musk here for a minute. You know, I one of my best friends is a devoted fan of Elon Musk, and he's the world's second richest man. He's clearly, I mean, you don't acquire that level of wealth without, you know, some degree of business acumen and good fortune, pun intended, and business instincts and all these things. And I know we can get into the weeds. You know, Cody Johnson of Some More News did a great attempted a debunk at Musk's cult of personality, and I know the jury is out on the scope of Elon Musk's brilliance. I don't know enough about that to weigh in. I really don't. But I do know enough about politics to say that Musk as a political wonk, as a political advisor, as a political commentator, he sucks, and his takes suck. So whatever genius he has, it clearly does not extend to politics, and his views should be derided and mocked as they seem to be. So hopefully Twitter goes in a better direction, and we will hear fewer and fewer political takes from a guy who, politically speaking, is really stupid. Hey you! Yeah, you! Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, and I hope that you did, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe. Also, my link tree is in the description below, so if you have a sec, go ahead and share the love on all my social media accounts. Also, if you want to express an opinion, eternal devotion, or undying contempt, go ahead and leave a comment because we're always looking for feedback. And on that note, I look forward to pondering politics and pop culture again with you very soon.